of the things I do in my work as a wealth mindset researcher is study the wealthy. And this was something that I was really inspired to do by the late Thomas J. Stanley. And he's the author of this book, which you've probably seen me talk about before and other places, called The Millionaire Next Door. And it was written in 1996, and it is still a timeless classic on what wealthy people choose to spend their time on, how they become wealthy in the first place, kind of the priorities that they have, the ways they choose to spend their money, and how they build and grow their wealth over time. And so in today's video, we're going to be talking about the top 10 takeaways from this book. And you can find this and many other books about money in my new series called The Money Book Club, which is down in my playlist, and I'll link to it in the description box as well. If you want more books about growing your wealth and wealth mindset, that's where you can find those. Okay, so let's talk about what are the 10 takeaways that are most important and most helpful for you from The Millionaire Next Door, and I'll link to that book as well if you want to buy a copy in the description. Number one is live below your means. So this is something that Dr. Stanley was really well known for in his research when he spent something like 30 years of his career studying millionaires and multimillionaires. And what he found is that they consistently lived below their means. So unlike, I think, a lot of times what we see and observe on social media, where we see people that look wealthy living these incredibly glamorous lifestyles, they might be doing it on a lot of debt. Now, granted, they might have really high incomes as well, which is great. But what he observed is that the majority of millionaires and multimillionaires do not live like that. Most of them live well below their means so that they can then save and invest the rest and continue to grow their wealth over time. Number two is that they allocate their time, energy, and money very efficiently. And this is something I'm going to be talking a lot more on my channel about as well, because I want to help you level up your money, but I also want to help you level up your life as a whole. And a big part of that is becoming more successful, more efficient, dealing with things like procrastination, all of these different things. So we're going to be talking a lot more about that on my channel as well going forward. And it's something I'm really excited to announce because I am really passionate about personal development as well as money and money mindset. So we'll be talking more about this, but they are very efficient with the way that they allocate their resources. They don't waste their time. They certainly don't waste their money, and they don't waste their resources. And so that's something that you can kind of take away from this book as something to really start prioritizing. Number three is they prioritize financial independence over displays of high social status. So this kind of gets back around again to what we see a lot of on social media today, where you see a lot of these displays of wealth and high social status versus financial independence, which, you know, unless you're there flexing about how much is in your bank account, it just doesn't tend to be something we talk about as much as people that are displaying the latest luxury car they bought, or the latest cool exotic vacation they went on, or the latest luxury handbag. So it's something that I think is a little bit less talked about than it should be. And that's what we talk about here on our channel and on our community here, is to talk about that financial independence piece of it as well. Number four is that millionaires generally avoid debt. And this is something that I've seen a lot of people talk about, that it is really important to avoid debt if you really want to build wealth. So again, you don't want to be living into this like high luxury lifestyle, lots of displays of status symbols and so forth, but be doing it on a lot of debt because you'll be spending a very long part of your life servicing debt. And so millionaires really avoid debt. They only take it out when it's absolutely necessary. They try to get it paid off as quickly as possible. And this is a point that's very near and dear to my heart, because this is definitely my approach. I'm not a millionaire yet, but that's definitely my approach as well, just because I feel like that just kind of takes away, in some sense, I feel like it takes away control over your life, because you owe money to so many different people, whether it's your mortgage or your car loans or something like that. And then it's just all these obligations that you constantly have to be able to fulfill no matter what changes in your life. So that can be very stressful. So millionaires in general avoid debt. Number five is that they are assiduous about saving and investing. So this is really, really key. And this is something that is really important to start practicing now, no matter how much money you have or you don't have, is really start working on saving and investing more of your money. If you choose to invest, obviously that's a choice that you definitely make yourself. And there's lots of good investment advice out there on YouTube and on podcasts. You can speak with an investment advisor. And then in terms of saving, what you want to aim for is a minimum of 20% of your income. You can obviously save a lot more than that, but just shoot for a minimum of 20% of your income if you are just getting started with working on saving more money. Number 6 takeaway from this book is that income does not equal wealth. So this is really, really key, because this is something that a lot of people, the minute that they start making higher salaries, they think, okay, I've made it. I can go out and buy all the things I always wanted that I've been putting off. But if you get into those higher income brackets, but then buy more and more and more things, you're never going to become truly wealthy. You're never going to achieve financial independence, right? So that's something to keep in mind, is that as you make higher and higher incomes, that's where you want to avoid that lifestyle creep. Number 7 is what Dr. Stanley referred to as economic outpatient care. Now, I think this is something that is probably less prevalent today, just because our parents' generation in general have a little bit less money to be able to be generous with their children than maybe, say, our grandparents' generation did, if you're my age. But his concept here is families who their grown-up children are overly dependent on them for their finances. So they give them a lot of handouts. They give them a lot of gifts. They might help them with buying cars. They might help them with the down payment on their home. And it's a really interesting perspective, because he doesn't think that, if your parents are wealthy and they're very generous with you, that that's necessarily good for you, because it maybe doesn't teach you the things you need to learn to be able to learn how to grow your own wealth, build your own wealth over time. And so he wasn't a big fan of having families where, if the parents were wealthy, that their adult children were overly dependent on them financially. And he goes into that at length in the book. But I think these days that's with the cost of living crisis and with people having to be more careful about how they're going to afford retirement. I don't know that that's as big of an issue as it was in the 90s. But I think that it's great to practice generosity in your family as you're able to. In particular, he was saying it's really great if you're able to help your kids or your grandchildren with educational expenses in particular, and give them the tools that they can use then to go out and get good jobs, make good money, and stand on their own 2 feet financially. So just an interesting perspective there. Number 8 is to choose the right occupation. And this is something Dr. Stanley really emphasizes, because he said it's really important to make sure that as you're going to college or as you're going to training for whatever career you're planning to go into, to make sure that it pays well and you can support yourself, and to then really think through strategically about your career, just from start to finish, from when you start your training to then what's your goal at the other end. And so I feel like that is really, really important, especially these days, probably more so than it was in the 90s, is to really make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on in the jobs market and what industries are hiring and firing right now before you go and spend a bunch of money or perhaps take out a bunch of debt on student loans to then perhaps have a job that is not hiring when you get done with your training. So really, really important to think that through. And then I think also, if you're able to, and he doesn't really mention this, but if you're able to, it's also really good to do internships, talk to people that are in the industries. I think there's websites now that will give you an estimate of how much you can make in a particular industry in your area or in the city you're looking at moving to. If you're going to move somewhere else after you go to college, that will give you a really good feel for, can you make a living wage with the job that you're looking at going into? And if not, are you okay with that? Or is that something that maybe you should rethink? So that's a really good strategy if you're just starting out, to really think that through. Number 9 is own your own home. Now, this is something that has really changed since the 90s, hasn't it? So there's a lot of economists today that actually make the argument that it doesn't make that much sense to own your own home, just with home prices being what they are and mortgage interest rates being what they are. But in general, if you're able to own your own home, then you're building equity in your home. That becomes an asset for you over time if eventually you live in it long enough and then want to sell it and downsize. So it can be a great great deal. It's all about kind of getting into the real estate market at an advantageous time for you. But this was, again, written in the 90s when the housing market wasn't anywhere near what it is today. But if you're able to, owning your own home is another way to continue to build wealth over time. And then number 10 is to be self-employed or own a business. Now, this is timeless and very, very relevant in today's society that we live in. So this is a really, really good point, because even if you're working for a company right now, it's really good to have a little business on the side, or a side hustle, or a product that you're selling on Etsy or Amazon, say, something like this, so that if something happens to your job and you get let go or you get furloughed or something like that, that you have other income coming in from your side job, and you know that at least you can count on that if something changes in your job market. So this is really, really good advice to have this. And this was something that he found, that so many of the millionaires and multimillionaires who he studied were self-made millionaires who got there through owning their own businesses and being entrepreneurs. Now, is that to say that everyone who's an entrepreneur becomes a millionaire? No, absolutely not. It took me a good 4 companies before I finally started this one and was able to have something that was a career for myself that was actually going somewhere, despite a lot of hard work. So it's very possible to start businesses that either no one's that interested in, or you kind of don't have the right product that you're bringing to market at the right time for people. So there's a lot of nuance into what goes into making entrepreneurship successful, rewarding, enjoyable, and sustainable. So keep that in mind, but definitely a good way to have it at least as a backup to your day job. And then if your self-employed job and your side gig starts to make more money than your day job, then you have some choices on your hands about what you want to do. And so that's a really interesting option for you there. And I want to close with this great quote from The Millionaire Next Door. Dr. Stanley has a preface that he wrote in 2010, and when this book was re-released then, and he said, "Why do I continue to write about rich people? It is not for the benefit of rich people. What I write is designed to enlighten those who are confused and misinformed about what it means to be rich. Most Americans have no idea about the true inner workings of a wealthy household." I would say we maybe have like a little bit more of a glimpse into this now with social media. You get such an intimate glimpse at people's lives. So perhaps we have a little bit more, but certainly we don't get in and get to have a real pull back the curtain and look at their finances and the way they structure everything and what their savings and investments look like. We don't really have that as much. The advertising industry and Hollywood have done a wonderful job conditioning us to believe that wealth and hyperconsumption go hand in hand. Amen to that. Yet, as I have said many times, the vast majority of the rich live well below their means. Unfortunately, most Americans think that they are emulating the rich by immediately consuming any upward swings in their cash flow. So I really like that approach. And again, that's where this title of this book comes from, is that, the millionaire next door is somebody that's still kind of living in a modest neighborhood in a modest home that they own because they've gotten it paid off, but they haven't had that lifestyle creep and that lifestyle inflation as they've built their wealth. Instead, they've taken any extra that they were earning and they save it, they invest it, and then they achieve financial independence while living a fairly modest lifestyle. So that's definitely one way to go about becoming wealthy. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but I really like his approach, and I think you'll enjoy this book if you pick up a copy and read it through. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And as always, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.